Now, last night, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa addressed the nation at this year's 2019 State of the Nation address. Among issues discussed were state-owned enterprises, Eskom, access to higher education, women abuse, and unemployment.
We shall immediately embark on a process of establishing 3 separate entities: generation, transmission, and distribution under Eskom Holdings. This will ensure that we isolate costs and give responsibility to each appropriate entity. This will also enable Eskom to be able to raise funding for its various operations much easily from funders and the market. Of particular and immediate importance is the entity to manage an independent state-owned transmission grid combined with the systems operator and power planning, procurement, and buying functions.
Well, joining us to unpack this year's SONA is Annabelle Bishop, Investec Chief Economist, Clancy Pai, economist and founder of Nascent's Research Insights, as well as Bonang Mohale, CEO of BLSA, who'll jump in the conversation a little later, and Pakamile Hlubi-Majola, who is the NUMSA spokesperson. Welcome to everyone, and thanks so much for your time. I'd like to begin with the economists. The announcement on Eskom, the bailout that we're expecting Finance Minister Tito Mboweni to announce, and also this restructuring into 3 units, a confirmation of a rumor that has been circulating the headlines for a couple of weeks now. Annabelle, what did you make?
So I think that's a very important point, the bailout for Eskom, because obviously given the dire financial situation that the state-owned entity is in, obviously it needs significant financial assistance, and of course that will be detailed for us on the 20th of February at the budget. Obviously, we didn't get much meat to the detail now. Even indeed the other plans that are obviously proposed for Eskom, dividing into 3 companies, all of that, again, not much of detail was given. Overall, the SONA, I suppose, is to provide a lot of areas where they're looking at to identify the core issues and problems in South Africa, and particularly I did like the strong emphasis on poverty alleviation. Sorry, my voice is not great. Poverty alleviation, and of course support for women and children against gender violence, all those key issues, of course, stimulating greater fixed investment, and of course we hear with great excitement the discovery of gas off the shores of South Africa and potentially oil as well, which could create a huge number of jobs in South Africa. These labour intensive industries such as tourism, renewable energy, even the gas, hydrocarbons offshore, and even if we were to produce cannabis from an agriculture perspective, as other countries are looking at as well, are all key, in a number of initiatives to try and ignite faster employment growth in South Africa. Sure,
and we'll break them down in just a moment, but I just want to stay on Eskom. Clancy, your assessment of what the President had to say about the future of Eskom.
Look, I think it's quite interesting in the sense that, it does make a lot of sense. I guess, as Annabelle says, we need a little bit more detail, right? Because Eskom has always had a head of generation, a head of transmission. So there's always been this path to Eskom. So it's very difficult to see how, if you now move one part to a different building, it actually becomes different. Unless, of course, they are talking about this whole thing about, partnerships or privatization, as some people will call it. So
because can I jump in there? Because, the way I'm thinking, and now you're going to move, or you're going to have these 3 separate entities operating individually. Are you going to need new management structures for it? And if so, does that not mean increasing in already, what some argue, a bloated staff complement of Eskom? Does it also not mean increasing costs there at Eskom?
Exactly, and revenue centers and all these kinds of things. So it's hard to tell what it is that they're trying to achieve in actually separating, and hopefully they will actually come up with a plan out of that. For example, we know that in there are some problems, for example, in transmission, right? Power getting lost, and in some ways, some people not wanting to pay. So who takes which part, and how do they manage it? And these are important things. So I think the one thing that we didn't articulate in actually, when these changes, what is the question we're actually trying to answer? And I think we need to first say, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to make Eskom a little bit simpler? Because one of the key things that some people have said is, this big giant, is it the only way in which we actually provide power to people? Are there different ways in which actually people could also work to participate in power generation.
Sure.
I mean, we have had all these discussions around independent power producers. But these are big things. But we are not moving quite close enough to moving power closer to people. Remember, there was a whole thing about much earlier in the 2000s. But I think we can do much better, especially if we look at other countries where they've done really, really well in renewable energy,
sure,
in actually allowing people themselves. I mean, we keep saying this whole thing about we want an open economy, we want people to participate. But we are not moving close enough because even as we break it down, it's not clear how we actually allow people to participate and move closer.
Sure, but I mean, as you guys have said, we'll have to wait for the details from Minister Mbwene's speech. But Phakamile, I'm sure you'd agree, like everyone on this table, that, you know what, Eskom can't afford to fail because the ramifications for everyone in this economy would just be too dire to even imagine. But what was your assessment on the President's way forward for making Eskom a little bit more financially viable?
Well, our view as NUMSA is that the way that the government is going about this, by breaking it up into three parts, this is privatization by other means. I mean, they should just call a thing and stop lying to the public, because that's exactly what it is. Mm-hmm. We've gone through this process with Roadtech Industries. Roadtech used to be part of Eskom. A couple of years ago, it was taken out and was privatized. The impact was massive job losses. Mm-hmm. So as NUMSA, we completely reject these plans. We've been saying, and even in our statements, long before SONA, that we know this is where the government is headed. We know that this breaking up of Eskom into these separate entities is just a means to privatize Eskom. In fact, the process has already begun through the disastrous IPP project. There are many options that this government should be exploring in terms of filling or dealing with the holes, the financial holes of Eskom. What they're doing with the solution is it's effectively a do-over. They get to start over. Nobody takes accountability for the more than 2 decades of rampant looting, mismanagement and corruption, which has brought Eskom to this disastrous position. We know that one of Eskom's big financial holes is actually the cost of coal. And we've been saying as unions for a very long time that when you analyze how Eskom has been paying for coal, I mean, in the period between 2008 and 2015, the price of coal went up 17% year on year. That's corruption. Sure. Where's the money from that? I
think we know what has happened at Eskom regarding the corruption. I mean, we are seeing the testimonies being revealed at the various commissions of inquiry that are underway in the country. So here's the thing, though. It's about now we need to move forward. The President has also committed to say that those who are found wanting and are found implicated in wrongdoing will be dealt with. So can we not, as labor unions or as NUMSA, have confidence in that? And just now we're talking about getting Eskom right again, so that the people and even the members that you're trying to protect, whose jobs you're trying to protect, actually still have a job, because many will argue that in its current form right now, those guys are going to lose their jobs if Eskom fails.
Well, you see, the problem here is that these solutions are actually not in the interests of the majority of people. They're not in the interests of the community of large. This is a solution that has been designed to protect members of the governing elite for the way that they've destroyed Eskom. And why should we have faith in the President when he says that those who are corrupt will be dealt with? What evidence have we seen to that effect to date? We've seen none of that. We've seen commissions where people are being accused of doing things, but we haven't actually seen any genuine action taking place.
Let's hope that we do. I mean,
no. But unfortunately, we can't live in hope.
But then look what he has done. I mean, we've got a new head that is heading up the National Prosecuting or the NPA office. He's mentioned something about Scorpions 2.0. He has gone or is drilling hellbent on how those who have been implicated in corruption will be dealt with. Let's take his word for now and let's try and move forward. In terms of solutions, though, for a solution that NUMSA would like to see that you believe is more labor friendly, what are you putting on the table?
Well, first of all, we can't take his word for it, and this is the problem that we have. We just can't. Okay. Because history has shown us that the governing party cannot be trusted when it comes to these things. I mean, that's just a fact. Secondly, in terms of the solutions, we've even as early as last year when we were negotiating talks with Eskom, we identified what the problems were and we presented a proposal with solutions. Our proposal included, for example, number one, the cancellation of the IPP project. I hear the president talking about a just transition. He's perverting what a just transition is. A just transition is a process which is led by the working class in the interest of the working class for the benefit of the working class. Right. There's nothing about this renewable energy program that is for the benefit and in the interest of the working class. We know that the IPP program will result in the closure of coal mines and the loss of 100,000 jobs. There's no plan for how to reskill those workers in the coal sector, put them in the renewable energy sector, because that has an impact on employment and unemployment in this country.
I mean, just to interject there, sorry, Pagamila, it was a 26-page document, so much to get through here. Final thoughts on Eskom. I mean, Annabelle, I do know that we are waiting for Moody's to give its latest assessment on South Africa's economy. I mean, is this something that you economists think could be ratings neutral?
Well, I think rather Moody's will be looking at the budget in order to give us assessment, because Moody's actually rates, and here we're talking about the country, the sovereign debt, and therefore be looking at the projected finances in terms of, you know, what's going to happen with our debt and deficit projections. So that will be on the 20th of February, and then Moody's expected to deliver its verdict on our country review in terms of what our credit ratings are going to be in the March period, towards the end of March. But of course, 29th of March actually. But of course, you know, obviously Eskom's issues are a big part of government finances, because government guarantees Eskom's debt, and obviously with Eskom reaching the end, and maybe it's an interesting point we can discuss, maybe with Eskom reaching the end of its guarantees, you know, now obviously it needs to look potentially to funding elsewhere, and on a standalone basis, if it goes into capital markets, the yields on its bonds, you know, government obviously guaranteeing it, so the yields are lower, but, you know, moving on a standalone basis into the market from a funding perspective, the yields will be very much higher, which will obviously mean substantially higher borrowing costs, and of course that will then feed into its substantial debt burden. So obviously, you know, a key issue there that the credit rating agencies will be looking at, also for the budget as well, to see how much financial assistance will come through, and then more details after the budget in terms of what exactly is going to happen with Eskom. You know, because we talked about the division into three companies, but what does it actually mean? And of course, the vital issues. Are we going to see the price of coal come down? You know, yes, we're going to see corruption issues, but are people going to be prosecuted and the money is brought back to South Africa? And these are big issues that international investors, clients of ours, are raising, you know, saying that with a high level of corruption, the perception is negative towards South Africa. Getting monies back and prosecuting people would improve that perception and obviously improve the government finances, improve Eskom's finances.
For sure. I mean, the president even said that he wants to improve our rankings when it comes to the ease of doing business to some ranking of 50. But Khansi, just to wrap up the conversation about SOEs, because he did touch on a little bit on the others, and you know, talking about how government would continue to provide support for strategic or important SOEs. I mean, we've been discussing this in the newsroom to say, okay, which SOEs are strategic right now?
Look, I think the big thing that has been a big problem in South Africa is how we think about SOEs as big conglomerates, and we think about coal mines, and then we say, how do they actually help economic activity and people who need employment? So how do we move closer to people and say, where are they actually put? So if you think about Eskom, we think about power generation, we think about how people empower themselves. How do we move closer to them so that the economy is not Eskom, it's not an SOE, it's actually how people can actually participate in their own power generation, stabilize power prices. I mean, Eskom is a huge drain on people, including, for example, when we think about small businesses. We know if Eskom collapses, and many times as it has, you know, shut down many times, it has killed small businesses, individuals who run bakeries, who run micro-enterprises.
Yes,
that's the people that have been
people at the bottom there. Yes,
and so if you shut down Eskom for a day, if you have a butchery and these people don't have working capital, the meat goes off. So it has really been very, very harmful. How do we actually take power back to people and stop talking about, when we think about ease of doing business, in our minds we think about big companies. We don't think about ease of doing business for small enterprises, where we keep saying those are the people who need it.
And to promote those entrepreneurs, they can employ more people and become larger enterprises.
Right. I mean, quite a lot was said about entrepreneurship as well. Yeah, I agree totally. Let's unpack that. We have to take a break for the people who pay our bills. I do understand. Be back in a moment as we continue to unpack the State of the Nation Address of 2019. We continue with our analysis of the State of the Nation Address delivered by President Ramaphosa for the second time yesterday. Annabelle Bishop from Investec and Clancy Pai, economist at Nascent Research continues to join us in a studio. Growing the economy. So he listed 5 urgent tasks. I don't know if this is a new stimulus plan, a new, I don't know how to name it. Can I list them? So number 1, accelerate inclusive growth and job creation, improve education, improve the lives of the poor, step up the fight against corruption and state capture, and strengthen the capacity of the state. Are these the most pressing concerns for our economy? Do you agree that dealing with this will be dealing or reviving South Africa's growth? Kansi.
Look, I mean, there's nothing new here. We have been discussing this for years and years and years. What I thought was interesting was the housing plan, and how you actually still trying to bring people closer to work opportunities.
Right.
And I think what we need to do is actually move back and think about how we bring economic opportunities to the people. I mean, we continue to use that whole spatial planning, the apartheid one, in which we all move from Soweto to Sandton, or from wherever it is to Sandton, instead of thinking, how can we actually have opportunities for people where they are?
Sure.
Because I mean, even if you think about small things like transport, really expensive. So everybody's moving this way, and we're going to build big, bringing buses and trains closer to this way. We need to think about the economy as people themselves where they are.
But you know what I like is the President mentioned in his SONA that they want to create digital hubs in the townships where the people live, which is exactly the point you're talking about. So people can both, they can both use them to run small businesses, get onto the internet access of 4th Industrial Revolution.
Sure.
But also they can go there as a learning facility as well. So very much like a community centre, which people used to have historically, where people can go and get support, go on courses, learn about small business at night, and then almost use it as a training centre as well, if you were to expand it, to train people in skills as well, and really bring skills development into those areas and micro businesses and help them grow up into big businesses. As you said, bring the industry into those areas. Also, the President mentioned as well industrial parks. I'm sure you saw the renewal of industrial parks. And I think that speaks to the same line as well, to deconcentrate out of the CBD or industrial or key areas.
Hey, there was some breaking news though, the establishment of a Human Settlements Development Bank. I mean, how would that work?
It's not a new idea. I think they have been actually working on this for quite a while, and I think at some point I heard that they were getting some input also from ratings agencies, just to be able to say, obviously financing is a huge part of this, and so you need some way to help finance, especially the lower end of the market.
Sure.
Although, of course, anytime government decides to take over private sector engagements, sometimes we get a little bit of a dicey ground, but we all know that we do need to service that lower end of the market outside of the free housing. So this is an important part of what the government has to be doing, so that to allow people also to, many people have said, you need to create a market in the townships. So the housing market has to be grown and be built up so that people can build assets.
People holding the, the papers to their homes, the title deeds.
Build assets so that you know that there is a growing market. Once you open that up, of course, you allow people to grow wealth. So these are important parts of what we have to think about. Economy is where people are. I keep repeating this. We need to stop this idea that the economy is there in the mine, in Sandton, in the big cities, that it is where people are. I mean, small things like where you take your car, where you get your car fixed. For example, many times, my car tends to run into things. So I have to sometimes take it to Sandton, where you could actually take it to a smaller guy in who has more capacity than where you have to wait sometimes 4 to 6 weeks to get it fixed. You can take it to Alex, just across the road from it. How do you capacitate people to be able to actually do that way? Because they know how to do it. So we have not actually figured out that we don't need people this way, we need people out there.
And they can also, if they have title deeds to their home, leverage the capital in order to get funding to grow these micro businesses you're talking about in the townships, to grow them larger and bigger as well. And hopefully eventually even have franchises and bigger dealerships there.
But I think the issue of title deeds is something that was covered. I mean, in the government's approach to land reform, they're talking about that, giving people title deeds to their home.
Want
and
that.
even people want that, right? Yes. And even ensuring that property rights remain for property holders, farmers, especially. Youth unemployment, a big thing in South Africa. We've got the worst in the world, right? Were you encouraged by his plans to address that?
Look, I think certainly what I am encouraged about in South Africa is suddenly having a lot more opportunities for sea change. And you know, youth obviously have still got a while to go, some of them, for education upskilling as well. So the education component was very important in the document, but you know, very important as well, looking at the huge labour intensity nature of, not so favoured previously, but by the previous speaker, but by renewable energy, and of course by tourism as well. And of course, you know, if we do obviously get R1 trillion in terms of, you know, the amount that this hydrocarbon discovery off the shore and Outeniqua Basin, you know, in Mossel Bay actually delivers for us, that's a huge opportunity for jobs again. Of course, agriculture very labour intensive. So if you can bring in the technology of the fourth industrial revolution into this and actually provide better quality jobs in terms of, you know, decent wages, skilled jobs, I think then there's a huge positive outlook for our youth. And I think, you know, the difficulty is transitioning to that, this period in between. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah,
and finding
opportunities. Let me jump in there,
because
he's talking about how the government will scrap the requirement of experience for graduates. I mean, what do you think about that in terms of, so I've gone to university, now I'm looking for a job, I'm expected to have 5 years experience, where did I get that? I've been in university for the past 4 years. Should the private sector be jumping on board?
This is a very surprising thing actually, because you know, the whole YES program, for example, with companies committed to taking on
those individuals who don't have experience is already in the private sector.
Exactly. But the thing is this, we are in a different situation, and we're not in a situation where the private sector wants people, but they just don't have skilled people. It's just there isn't enough demand.
There's not enough jobs to provide the opportunities for people. And if the economy is growing a lot faster, there would be a lot more job opportunities for people without skills who are young and, you know, battling to find employment. Plus, don't forget as well that the government has now extended by another 10 years a youth incentive program to encourage, from a tax incentive basis, to encourage the employment of youth as well. So I think one needs to read it, you know, quite with a balance. You know, that they're not going to say that, you know, the reason you can't get a job is because you don't have experience. Quite frankly, the reason you can't get a job is because we've had 10 years of the economy moving from a job creating rate of 3% to now one of 0.5%. In fact, actually it was 5% at the end of Thabo Mbeki's period, and it's now dropped down to 0.5%. So it's gone from 5 to 0.5. So we've lost a full decimal place. And that then results in many people not getting jobs, because if your company is doing very well, you've got a lot of profits, you're willing to take on a lot of young people and spend the money training them. If you are barely scraping by, your company could possibly close its doors and you are making a loss, you don't have money to spend on anything. So the stronger the economy, the better equipped companies will be in general to take on youth.
Guys, we are out of time, but in one word, I mean, is this the kind of plan that gets the economy stronger? I mean, positive or negative on SONA 2019? One word. That's not a word. Maybe.
I'm saying hopefully, yes.
Wow. Different versions of saying maybe, hopefully, saying the same thing. They're both neutral. But nonetheless, that is where we leave the conversation right now with our economists unpacking the State of the Nation address that was delivered by the President of South Africa, that is Cyril Ramaphosa. I'm saying goodbye to Annabelle Bishop, who's Investec Chief Economist, and of course, Clancy Pai, economist and founder at Nascent Research Insights.